Hi, my friends. Welcome. This is the Back to Me podcast, and this is Heather, and I am super excited that you're here. You are going to hear some tips and some tricks and some ideas to help you live your happiest and healthiest self. I call it Back to Me because when you are taking care of yourself, back to me, then you can take better care of others, and we can all make the world a better place. This is Wellness Your Way, and I am super happy that you're here. Hello, my friend. Welcome. I hope you're having an excellent day. And welcome back to the Back to Me podcast, where we're going to talk about wellness and all the ways that we can be well, because as you know from listening, that there's so many ways and so many things to think of. And I get to talk to another amazing human being today, which is my favorite part of the podcast, is sharing with you all of these amazing human beings that I get to talk to. And today I am welcoming Jennifer K. Hill. I called you an evolutionary, and you are the CEO of OptiMatch, which is the om.app, right? Is that where that arises from?
Yep.
Welcome. It's so great to be able to have you come and chat with us on the show.
Thank you, Heather. It's such a pleasure to be here with you and your listeners.
And thank you. And there's one thing I always am very interested. I mean, we have talked, but I'm always very interested in how you came into this space that you are now. And specifically, I'm thinking of when we talked about you being a recovering asshole, because it was such a good story and so many people could relate.
Yeah, people ask me, it's always the origin story question, right? Like,
Yes.
before and after. In fact, a dear friend of mine who I'll dedicate this episode to on my end, Dr. Mark Golston, just passed away earlier this week, and he was my mentor. He's an angel. He's now one of my dead mentors. That was Mark's thing, is he had Larry King was a friend of his and all these wonderful people, and he would always share about his dead mentor stories. So funny little thing about one of the last times Mark and I saw each other for lunch in LA. Mark wrote a lot of best-selling books. I mean, he left a legacy, had one of the most popular podcasts, like 0.5 top percent of podcasts out there.
Oh.
And what was extraordinary, we're sitting there for lunch, and Mark knew my story of the before and the after. And I said, Mark, I've been invited. Somebody was asking me at the time to write a memoir. And I was thinking of calling it I'm a Recovering Asshole. And Mark's like, no. He's written all these best-selling books. He's like, I have a much better title for you. I was like, bring it on, Mark. What is it? So eventually I'm going to have to write the book now and dedicate it to him. And it's Bitch in Recovery. That will one day be my award-winning book, dedicated to my dear friend and mentor who just passed, Mark. And I share that because people look at me now and they think, oh, you're amazing. You pray, you meditate 2 hours a day. I mean, who even are you? And I'm like, yeah, but,
Right.
a lot of people, it's like, we don't know each other's stories. That's the thing. If you talk to my parents, my sister, my friends, God forbid, my colleagues back in my late teens, early 20s, I was selfish, obstinate, and downright a jerk to everybody. And particularly the reason that happens is the people who are the biggest jerks to others, it's because we're a jerk to ourselves. And it was really only out of me being in this personal development class. So how I got there was kind of funny. My boyfriend at the time, his best friend, had just gifted he and his brother a personal development class, right? I'm in my early 20s. He's a few years older than me. And he does this class shortly after we start dating. And Heather, he becomes one of those guys. You got to do this. You got to do this class. And I was the person who was like, you can't make me. I forgave him because he was hot and you're young and you don't really care about anything else. So we're dating at the time, but he kept going on and on about this stupid class. Finally, 8 months into our dating, I decide to take it to prove it's a cult and a crock of shit. So literally, it wasn't out of some altruistic wanting to transform myself. Now, here's the behind the scenes, like pulling back the curtain, Wizard of Oz style. I was bulimic, drinking often, hated myself, had very few friends, and was just like introverted beyond belief and was afraid to be in public. So all this is going on, and yet I put on this strong bravado and facade. So fast forward, I'm sitting there day one of class, and in case anybody is confused as to why I'm in the class, I'm wearing a shirt that very clearly says, emblazoned on it in fuchsia, Von Bitch. It was a popular brand back in LA at the time. So the man who's facilitating the class says, "Any questions?" as he looks over a sea of 150 faces in a room outside LAX. My hand shoots up and he's like, yes, you over there in the Von Bit shirt?" And I was like, he says, "Do you have a question for us?" And I said, "Yes," arms crossed, sneering at him. I said, "How would you respond to the fact that this, meaning the class, is a cult?" He looks at me, looks around the room, gives a little chuckle, and says, "If it is a cult, it's the best damn cult you'll ever join. Next question." And Heather, I was just sitting there and I was being a judgy bunny. I was stewing in self-righteousness. Here I am dealing with having been bulimic at that point, I think 6, 7 years, throwing up
Wow.
20 times a day, hating myself, literally suicidal. Tried to kill myself closely 2 times out of 3. And I'm just sitting there judging everybody who's getting these big breakthroughs in their life. And yet I'm being obstinate. So the class comes to its completion, and now your friends, and in my case, my boyfriend comes, and they're excited to see this transformation that you've had. However, I am still the tadpole. I am not the frog. I am sitting there, and my boyfriend's sitting next to me, and the woman who is co facilitating it comes up and says, "Are you going to do that dance class?" And I looked at her, I looked at my boyfriend and I said, "It was stifling enough having sat in this room for the last 3 days. Do you really think I would choose to do this again?"
Oh
Like, you
my
can't just that, like,
goodness.
I have to give people this context because people, like, are like, "Oh, but you're all light and air," and no. So, this happens. I look at my boyfriend, he shakes his head, he says, "Don't get me started. It took her 8 months just to do this class." And I looked at him, and Heather, this was one of those moments where your life goes down one of 2 paths. And in that moment, I looked at him and I said, "This is an at will relationship. You can leave anytime you want." And the woman looks at me, and she's a dear friend of mine to this day, so you'll know how the story ends. And she looks at me and she says, "Can I be really straight with you?" And I said, "Sure, darling. You go ahead. You be really straight with me." Now, she was the first person, Heather, in my whole life to call me on my crap. She said, "You are a nasty thing. You are one of the most powerful women I have ever met in my life. Except you know what? You are using your powers to destroy the people around you. You are like Godzilla walking through a city with a huge tail swinging behind you, knocking down buildings wherever you go. Except you know what? Those aren't buildings, those are people whose lives you're destroying." She looks at my boyfriend, says, "Leave her, it's what she needs," and walks away. And and that was my moment. That was my awakening moment. I think I was about 23 years old. It was around September. I don't remember what the year, maybe 2005. And that was the catalyst. I went into my office the next day because I wanted to see if this woman was off her rock or if I really was as big of a jerk as she said I was.
Right?
And so about 25 people in my office, we had our, I think it was like a Monday or Tuesday team meeting. And I said, "Guys, have I ever been condescending or demeaning or mean to any of you?" It went so silent, you could hear a pin drop. Until one woman started bursting out laughing. It's like, "Oh my God, Jay Hill," that was my old nickname. "You are only the biggest bitch we've ever met. We have no idea how you're successful." And I was like, "Well, shit, that's a blind spot I didn't know I had."
Oh my gosh.
That's why I'm coming up on my 43rd birthday in March of this year. And it's been 20 years now of spiritual work and personal development. It's an ongoing thing. Does the beast rear its ugly head every now and again? Yeah, we're all human. We all have moments where we get angry, frustrated, sad, and as long as we attend to our own needs, as long as I've slept enough, had enough water, meditated, taken care of myself for the most part, you learn how to self regulate. But, then you figure it out later down the road, and, we're all doing the best we can. That's what I've since learned.
That's epic. I have to tell you, that is an epic story, and evolutionary is totally you.
Thank you, thank you.
And that's even more than we talked about previously, which I think is awesome. And when you find that person who can call you out and that you are able to hear it, like your life completely shifts, right? I mean, if she hadn't done that, you would have just continued on your road to who knows?
And may we be that person for other people, and may we be willing and able to receive it. That is the biggest thing. That's one of the things I admire so much about my now husband is I'll give him feedback. I'll be like, "Honey, did you realize you said something you might not have meant to said? You were judgmental about this or that." And he's so amazing, and coachable. Be like, "Oh my gosh, honey, you're right. That wasn't what I was committed to." I was like, "I love you so much."
Those are gems. You must keep those, right?
Yeah,
You must keep those. I'm
tuck them.
curious, did your boyfriend break up with you?
No, he married me.
Even better.
Makes the story more that was my ex-husband. We were together 14 years, and talk about miracles. I mean, my life is just one huge miracle. The fact that I almost died so many times, from suicide attempts and just reckless behavior between the ages of, God, 15 to 23, give or take, I would say, and to survive that. And, my ex-husband, so I left him in October of 2018, and 14 days later, I made a deal with the universe. I was like, "Universe, I'm gonna make you a trade. I have a perfectly good, slightly used husband. He comes complete with the car, the dog, the house. He's like Ken. He has all the accoutrements. You can have him back. My only request is give him his soulmate." I said, "I will pray and meditate." I even asked my ex-husband what his soulmate would look like, "and give me mine. That's all I want. I'm not asking for too much here. You can have him back completely unscathed." And 14 days after I left my ex-husband, I met my now husband, and we've been together ever since.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
See, it's like Abraham says, ask. You just have to ask and then be open to receive it, right?
yeah.
So good. So I know today's topic is tools for personal resilience. And did you take any of the tools from that personal development class that you hated? Or
Yeah.
did you just make all new ones?
That is a good question. Nobody has ever asked me that question. I like to think of it as spiritual tool soup. So all of
Okay.
these tools, I gathered them from that first personal development class, which I learned a lot about. It was called Landmark Worldwide for anybody interested in
Okay.
researching it. That was the one that I did. I studied with Michael Beckwith at Agape. I've been studying Kabbalah for 11 years. I studied with Alison Armstrong. I've studied with just countless teachers. So ever since then, because I know I have the capacity for great darkness, I focus as much of my attention. I'm the queen of tools. Like one day when I was sitting during COVID, you have 7, 8, 10 hours a day, for me at least I did, of prayer and meditation. I was really grateful during COVID. I was happy, contented, peaceful, had more time to pray and meditate and be reflective. And one day I hear clear as day a channel that says, "You need to write a book called 101 Spiritual Tools for Uncertain Times." And I'm like, "What? I don't even know 101 tools. What are you talking about?" And as I'm sitting there, I remember exactly where I was sitting in London at the flat I was renting. It's overlooking the water and the Thames. It's beautiful. And I'm sitting there, and my hand, like we were talking about earlier about how our hand starts writing, wrote down 101 tools. And I was like, "What?" Like,
Okay.
I was like, "Well, I guess we're doing this." So I wrote book 1 of 101 Spiritual Tools, which has 10 tools. I have book 2 partially written, and then life happened, and I've created new companies and been traveling the world, and I have an opportunity to finish publishing the rest of these. So that has become my passion, is sharing tools for self-regulation, tools for resilience, love heart math. I'm a heart math certified trainer and coach, and any of
Amazing.
the executive clients, yeah, that I work with, I'm always pulling in heart math tools from that.
Yeah, I learned about heart math from watching Greg Braden, who I love.
I love Greg. He just
I
joined me.
love Greg.
He and I have a show that came out, or is coming out on January 11th. So he's a dear friend. I adore Greg. We agree with that.
He's on my list of people that someday I'm going to meet in real life and give him a big squeeze for all of the things that he has shared and
He's
the things that I have learned from him.
he's a beautiful soul. You should go visit him. He has an event happening, and we were trying to see if I could see him when I'm in town. I'll be in the US, and he's going to be there end of January. He and Bruce and Chamonix. And I think, Anita actually from, who wrote the book about her near-death experience,
Mm.
they're all doing a talk in Arizona, and I'm so bummed to miss it. I have a speaking gig that weekend, so I can't join them.
It's tough to be in demand.
I know, it's like you're pulled here, you're pulled there, but you know what? When you're living your path and you're in integrity, I was doing an interview with somebody earlier, the founder of the Octopus Movement, Perry,
Mm.
Nopert. And we were talking about it, when you just live your truth, all of a sudden you're like a light and people just want to be around you. And it's because so many of us live in denial like I was for the first half of my life of our truth. And then when we own it, you don't even have to try. You just love what you do and you get to meet wonderful people like yourself, Heather or Greg or whomever. To me, everybody is equally important. And I don't look at one person as less or more. It's just people are people. And I think as long as we turn our light on, then it attracts other people's lights.
And do you find, because I know from people that I've talked to that some people struggle with even knowing what their light is, how to be, you can call it a soul contract, however you want to refer to it. Like, there's people that I know who just don't, they just feel lost. Do you think that your personal resilience I feel like there's a connection in there somewhere, that finding that personal resilience helps you tap into something inside of you that needs to come out.
Yeah, I'm going to give you an analogy that my
Mm.
couple teacher, David Guillaume, one of my favorite podcasts of all time is called Weekly Energy Boost. I haven't missed it since it first came out. In fact, I had David on my podcast years ago. I was like, David, you need to do this. You have wisdom to share. So this is one of his pieces of wisdom to answer the question of resilience and how it ties in. In Kabbalah, they say there are these things called klipot, and klipot are like dark energy that suck up all our light, right? They like eat our light and you can't reveal it. So the analogy they say is imagine that you have a light bulb, and this is the brightest light bulb. This is Heather, this is me, this is every one of you out there. And that light bulb is luminescent and is glowing. However, something happens. And when something happens, then all of a sudden a layer of dark cellophane paper, what the Kabbalists would call klipot, comes and it blocks a little bit of light. You can still see some of it, but then something else happens and you stop shining your light until finally all of that beautiful radiance and light that you once had is now blocked by, you can call it Kabbalistically the klipot, or you can call it, whatever you want spiritually. But the idea is that we then block our light. And every time we do some self-resilience work and some personal development work, you're peeling off one of those little layers of the cellophane. A little bit more light is getting through. So to me, resilience is about being proactive rather than reactive. When we're reactive, we're almost like pulling the covers over our head, right?
Right.
You're like, you can't make me. I don't want to, just like I was in that class.
Yes.
Proactive. I was just talking to one of my best friends earlier about this. She and I are accountability buddies, and we do a call for 10 to 15 minutes. Also, great tool. It's one of the tools I recommend. Have an accountability buddy who might not be in your business. She's a children's book writer. I'm a software company CEO. So we're totally different, and yet we're always reflecting things to each other. And so I had a challenging call earlier right before I got on with her, where something was frustrating me and it was like a legal thing and it should have been done differently and, coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? And
Right.
I introduced her to Kabbalah a while ago and she just came from a class. She's like, Jen, you know what Kabbalah would say? When things seem really shitty, it's actually for the good. And I'm like, I love that you just turned that right back around on me. And that's the beauty of having an accountability buddy is you can share your wisdom with them, and then they'll reflect it back to you when you need it too.
Right. That was perfect, because I was just thinking, um, when people are talking to me right now, because we were just talking before I came on that I broke my wrist on vacation. When people are talking to me now, they're like, "How terrible." I'm like, "No, because I learned a lot in it." So, um, I feel like I got the injury, but I'm reflecting to them how to deal with the crap that's coming on in their lives. It's like, you don't have to go down that dark road. You can go the higher road, I guess, is another way to think of it. And so did you come up with more than 101 tools?
I actually, if you follow me on any of my social media, I have 300. Well, I got to 181. I started to post every single day for
Wow.
365 days of tips for living your best life, ranging from everything you can imagine. I mean, all sorts of tips. I throw some travel tips in there. I spend about 4 months on the road every year. So I share a variety of tips in addition to spiritual tools on that. You can find it on TikTok. I think it's at Jennifer K. Hill. You can find it on at Jen Hill Speaker on Instagram or on my old Facebook videos. But what's funny, I have to be really honest, I got to day like 185, I think, where every day, Heather, I did not miss a day. No matter where I was in the world, I was posting one video a day. And then one of my mentors, brilliant woman, I would recommend having on the show, Melissa Bernstein. She's the CEO and creator, co-creator of Melissa and Doug toys that a lot of children play with. And she, actually through another podcast host, became a mentor of mine in the last year or so. And she's mentoring me, and I'm now at like video 185 or whatever it is. And she's like, Jen, you should only do the things in your life that bring you joy. And if it doesn't bring you joy, just stop. And it was in that moment, Heather, like somebody gave me permission. I am not a fan of social media, nor do I like posting on social media, nor do I spend more than 2 minutes a day on social media. And here I was spending like 15, 20 minutes a day just to post these videos on TikTok and Instagram, etc. And I was like, do you mean, Melissa, I can stop posting these videos? She's like, yes, you can.
That's awesome.
Screw it. So I just like dropped it like a hot potato. I was like, done. So to answer your question, yes, I have at least 185 videos, tips that I have shared that you can find on my social media accounts. Or if you Google Jennifer Cahill, a lot of them will pull up. And you will not see me posting 186 video because
Done, done. Well, it's interesting. I was in a group program yesterday and with my Akashic Records reader friends, and we were talking about business. And there are these prescriptions. Not everybody who listens is in business, but I know some of you are. Prescriptions of you have to do this on social media, you have to do this many emails, you have to do this and this, and there's these things you're supposed to do. And we were talking about that's like old earth energy of how
Mhm.
to be in business, where new earth energy is more what feels like the right flow to be in. So if you're forcing 185 videos and it doesn't feel good, that's going to come through. That energy comes through. So instead, do stuff you like doing, right? I love podcasting. You love speaking. I know you love speaking. I can just tell when I talk to you that you love speaking, right? So it's like go do those things because that's a way to shine your light, right? And trust that the universe delivers what you need through that being in that energy of that space, right?
Yeah, you are 1000% right. Like, I had a mentor who actually trained me on social media back before it was a thing. Like, I was an early adopter of Twitter, early adopter of LinkedIn. But then I realized it just didn't feel authentic. And now when I post, if you see something I post, 95% of the time, it's because it's the joy of it. Like, I'll be inspired to share an article or inspired to share a picture. And it really is coming from the heart. And you see it in the numbers. Like, people really resonate with it as opposed to just doing it because you said you would. And that's funny. That's something that was both good and also had its downside to that very first personal development class. There was a huge conversation in that landmark class around keeping your word.
Mm.
So I was diagnosed about 5, 6 years ago as being high functioning autistic on the spectrum, and my brain is literal. So if somebody literally tells me I have to do something, literally you have to keep your word. That's why until Melissa told me I didn't have to do that anymore, my literal brain went repeat pattern, do what you said, keep
Right.
word. That's what landmark said, must keep word. Computer says no, it does not compute.
Wow. That's a lot of pressure to have on yourself.
Oof, it's normally pretty good. Thank God for self-regulation tools. A dear, wonderful friend I would recommend as well, named Michelle Raz, who is coaches people who are on the spectrum. She said, Jen, the first thing I do with clients who are on the spectrum is I work with them on self-regulation tools, just what we're talking about resilience. So years ago, to give you context, Heather, I used to have meltdowns all the time, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't understand where it was coming from. I just knew that if you put me in a crowd at a concert or something, I would just like hyperventilate, be in tears, just not be able to process it. And so nowadays, because I know what I need in my self regulation tools, I am doing heart math real time during interviews. If I feel activated, I meditate. If I, whatever it is I'm doing it, I travel with my own food. If I get really hungry, normally that sends me into a meltdown. So I travel with my own food. But there was an instance, I just got back from 3 weeks in Asia where I was speaking in India in front of like, I don't know, it was 50 or 100,000 people. And it was incredible. except for the last night. Now, I had self-managed, thank God my dear friend Amy, who I love and adore, you should have her on, she's wonderful. Um, we're traveling the whole time, and I told her about my meltdowns, and I was keeping it under control. I was like, because sometimes, like, there was one hotel room we got to early on in Sri Lanka, and it had, like, film over the window, so you felt like you were, like, boxed in. I was like, "Nope, I can't. Nope, 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 I can't, I can't, I can't." Like, so that was the closest I had had to a meltdown. But then one of the last days of the trip, we had been so fortunate to get to speak on these big stages, and they flew us to this other location. Well, right as we're about to fly, they're like, "Oh, and by the way, you're speaking at 11 p.m. tonight." And the day had started at 5 a.m. with a 3-hour
Oh
meditation.
my gosh.
And I was like, I was really literal brain was like, does not compute, must sleep, don't know what to do, but they've already promoted it. So I get there, and by the time I had been up 22 hours, all bets were out the window. I remember trying to get back in the hotel room, and I had been holding it together, and I couldn't open the darn hotel room. And I just started crying like I fell down. So, like, that's the thing is our personal resilience is directly correlated to how well we're taking care of ourselves. If we're honoring ourselves, if you know you can't last 22 hours, some people can. I'm not that person. I hit that like 14, 16-hour max, and I'm like, must go to bed now. Otherwise, I'm going to be delusional. But if you don't know that about yourself, or if you don't have the tools, I got through that whole day until the moment I got to that door and I couldn't get in.
Thank
But
goodness.
yeah, the personal resilience tools, though, did get me through. Otherwise, I would not have literally survived it, let alone been able to speak on stages morning and night.
Right? And I mean, everybody, I feel like you can develop like you managed to get through that whole day. So you can work on developing your capacity. But when you have to go beyond, but I feel like it knocks you back down. It takes you a while to recover. And having those tools in place to help you navigate those times is important. And this is going to take us to a little sideways. So not sideways, straight ways. So
Okay.
how did you get from 100 and wait? How did you get from tools from resilience to CEO of OptiMatch? Like, I don't see the road in front of me or you. Not that roads are straight, but
So I jokingly say I have many facets to my personality. There's business Barbie Jen. So since I was a young girl, I loved, even when I was 12 years old, I would pull, my mom had like one suit jacket. I would pull her one suit jacket out of the closet and wear her oversized suit. I think for like my 12-year-old graduation, I was totally, that's one of the big signs, I guess, if you're on the spectrum, is you dress like an adult when you're a very young kid. And so I remember going to like my 12-year-old graduation and wearing my mom's like polka dotted top and her like blazer. I borrowed my mom's whole outfit. I was literally like a little 12-year-old adult, like showing up to that. So there's always been a side of me that has loved the business and the logic. And I had built and sold my first company in legal recruiting actually almost exactly 6 years ago. It was acquired in 2018. And so I have these two interesting facets to myself. On the one hand, I could go sit and meditate on a mountain or on a stage in India for hours at a time. And on the other hand, I'm really good at understanding contracts and solving complex problems. And so I like to say we created OptiMatch out of literally out of survival for me, because when I was running the last recruiting firm, long before I knew I was on the spectrum, people didn't make sense to me. You can imagine an awkward little girl who's like 12 years old dressed in her mama's suit thinking that's like normal, right? Like no context that that's abnormal. So I learned to mask for the most part, and I didn't understand people. The analogy I share, Heather, it's like Heather got a book on how to be a normal person, and Bob and Joe and Susan got books on it. My book was blank. So people were a mystery to me. It was unfathomable to me why I was always saying and doing things that would offend people or hurt people's feelings, or why I was bullied. So it led to me out of necessity and survival to study people like an experiment. Like I was an alien going along, oh, what are these people doing? I don't quite understand what does that motion mean
you
on
didn't
their
abduct anyone, did you?
uh, girl, we're not gonna die. No, just kidding. But like, it's funny actually. In one of the first episodes I ever did with Deepak Chopra in 2020, I remember being so humiliated and embarrassed because I think it was episode 4. It was midnight my time in London. We're recording, and in the comments, you know, you should probably never read the comments. It says, is the woman interviewing Deepak a robot? And so I swear to God, there's like, if you go back and find one of the early episodes, because I've only in the last 4 years, thank God for my dear friend Arthur Samuel Joseph, who I love. He trained Tony Robbins, Pierce Brosnan, all these people. Every time I'm on a call, he's like, put joy in your put. I'm like, that didn't make sense to me. I didn't understand. I had resting robot face most of my adult
Oh my
life.
gosh.
I didn't know. So now I understand, oh, people wanna make sure that I look approachable, and it's changed my life knowing this, but I didn't know this until recently. So back to OptiMatch, I studied people, and I've always been very good at intuitively understanding what motivated people because I had to figure it out. So my current co-founder, Julian Adler, was my business coach who helped me sell the last company, who's also on the spectrum, brilliant man and a coach. And Jules came on board and said, Jen, what if we could encapsulate your intuition into a mathematical formula to match people? And I was like, can we do that? Okay, next thing, world domination. Tell me what, how does that work? So Julian, thank God, is a software engineer by trade, and Moon, who is one of our original co-founders who helped us design it. The three of us spent about 8 months developing the software together. And we tested, retested, and sure as heck, it turned out we started off testing it in a healer therapist coaching platform, and we got to an 87% satisfaction rate. And it was pretty
Wow.
astounding that what I had always intuited turned out to work pretty darn well. And then fast forward, we actually wound up really unexpectedly. People are like, well, can we use this for hiring? Can we use this for teams? And that's where I gained all the wisdom, was from building the recruiting company. So now anybody can go to survey.om.app. You can answer our matching questions. If you tell me that you heard the show, we don't normally do it on a B2C side. It's normally only B2B, and it's normally $29.99 for a report. But if you tell me you saw this show, I will honor my word on this, and we will give you a complimentary report. It just gives you a quick little one-on-one report with you and anybody else that you just have to tell me the emails and follow up with me after this. And then we can run a report and tell you how naturally aligned you are. Now, it's very important to note, just because two people have different motivating factors is not bad or wrong. However, it can help you to cultivate compassion. So we measure four main areas that people are motivated by: fun, facts, achievement, and other people's needs, prioritizing other people's needs. And depending on that, we can tell you where potential friction points are. And it's completely different than a personality test. Your personality is static. However, your motivating factors are going to evolve over time. As I was sharing with
Mm.
somebody on a call before this, she said, well, are my numbers always going to be the same? I said, no, because once before, it was 2021 New Year's, I was in Hawaii, and I answered our matching questions when we were in early testing phase, and I tested very high in lychee, which is like the driver one, and very low in some of the other numbers. So then I went into silence, Heather, for 48 hours, complete silence, reflection. And when I came out, I answered the survey again, and I was almost completely even across the board. So that's the interesting thing, is that our
Wow.
motivating factors are going to shift. Now, most of the time, my motivating factor is always lychee, which is the driver one. No matter how many times I've taken it, even the time where I was even, I was still like 1 point higher in lychee. So we're still always going to have the same main motivating factor, but how high or low it is depends on our state of mind and how resilient we are.
Right. That's amazing. It reminds me a little bit of, I interviewed Karen Eit last year, and she does the true colors.
Oh, I don't know that.
Oh, it's the same, it's similar, but I think it looks more to personality of your um your your way of being in the world. And it's she'll give me a heck if I get it wrong. Gold, green, blue, and orange. And golds are highly analytical, and probably a lot of people who are on the spectrum are very gold. They're very, these are the rules, this is how we follow them. And greens are analytical, but more inventor types.
Mm,
And gold and oranges are the people who jump out of airplanes.
yeah.
and, and blues are the heart-centered, like want everybody around them to take care of everyone around them. And I've been in her workshop a couple of times where we talk about how, especially in the workplace, if you have people who are on opposite ends of those personality types, how they will clash. So they're very interesting on how they work together. But I like the idea of yours because you are different on a different day, and I find I can change depending on what I've been doing on any given day. If I've been at a rock concert, I'm going to be I'm going to be very up and out, and then if I've spent 3 days in a silent retreat, like you said, you're just somebody else, and you're in a different state of mind. So very cool. So if anybody missed the link, don't worry. We're going to put it in the show notes, survey.om.app. And we're going to I guess we have to put your email there, or will they get an email?
You know what? They can go ahead, and that's a good point. I'll go ahead and give you a different email that people can
Yes.
go to. You can have people go to my other email, which is Jennifer K. Hill 2023 at gmail.com. And then they can use that one.
Yes. Just so you don't get, just in
Yeah.
case you do get inundated with tons of requests that we don't want to jam up your working inbox.
Thank you.
Right.
I appreciate it. That's very sweet of you.
Absolutely. I feel like you've just listed a whole bunch of people that you say should be on the podcast. I feel like you're gonna have to email me all their names
Yeah,
because
I'll remind you of them. I always wanna attribute the teacher, so for me, again, maybe it's an Asperger's, whatever you wanna call it thing, but I always wanna attribute the source, because if something didn't come from me, I always wanna give credit to wherever the source came from.
and I feel that's an energetic thing anyways. We know that, um, as I don't think anyone is self-taught in the way that we life teaches you, and even everyone that you meet or pass has somehow in some way taught you something. And if I can remember people's names, I always share them. Since my stroke, some of the names have been erased out of the back of my head. I'm repopulating my name list, but I do find it so amazing the connections that you can make between people, and how this reminds me of Brene Brown. So resilience is often, for me, and maybe for you, and maybe you could speak to that, is you're connecting with other people and the teachers who can help you and reflect that back to you,
Mm. Yeah,
whatever you need to hear.
I can't say I've heard Brene Brown share that,
Mm.
but I do love her work, and actually, I'm very thoughtful. I never like to use the word "but," and I do like her work. And when it comes to resilience, it gives us space. And from a heart math standpoint, when you're in a state of coherence, then it's safer for other people to be around you. It creates a sense of safety, is what I would explain it. So when we
Right.
feel safe with one another, then a whole myriad of emotions and possibilities opens up, and miracles open up for us when we're in that space of safety. And yet when we're reactive, we've been around somebody who's reactive. They're yelling, they're angry, their arms are crossed, they're adversarial. That's what we say why we created OptiMatch, is to reverse the accidental adversarial relationship between human beings. Because even if our motivating factors are polar opposites, if we can bring, as Arthur would say, our conscious awareness to it, from that place, we're going to be able to then cultivate compassion. But until we're aware of it, we're going to be accidentally adversarial with one another.
That's excellent. I always say when I do these podcasts, my minds always get blown by someone's, like, just what you share is so good. I like the accidental adversarial relationships, and it explains so much in just those words, that you don't intend to go into those things, but something has happened. And I feel like, um, those dark things that you were discussing earlier that cover up your light, we may have originally put them on as protection, but really
Mm,
they're doing the opposite. They're creating more problems than protecting.
yeah.
And if you could peel them off and feel safe, it's the safety factor that brought this into my mind. If you could peel those off, you would be safe, and you just have to trust that it's actually safer to be there without them,
Mm,
right?
beautiful.
Yeah, that's so amazing. Oh my gosh, you have so much wisdom and so much amazingness to share. I just feel like we could just talk and talk and talk. But I'm going to honor your time, and I'm going to honor our listeners' time. But before we go, I'm always interested if you have whatever drops in for you, final words of wisdom for the listeners.
What I immediately heard when you said that, Heather, is to forgive yourself. And then what I heard immediately after that is what Neil Donald Walsh shared on an interview. It was very funny. I love Neil. It was one of the first spiritual books I ever read, Conversations with God. And it was such an honor and privilege to get to interview him on regarding consciousness. And what I loved that Neil did, he argued with me in a couple of really fun ways. And so I mentioned, as I said the words, forgive yourself, then Neil's voice popped in my head and said, no, 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 Jennifer, remember what I said. Cultivate understanding, not forgiveness. So I'm going to parrot what Neil said. Instead of forgiving yourself, have understanding. Cultivate understanding for yourself or for anybody else who you might be holding a grudge against. And if that was a gift I could give to each and every one of us this year, it would be to cultivate understanding, to put down our arms and to reach out and hug one another, whether it's metaphysically or just physically, but just put down our arms and realize that everyone is doing the best they can in every moment, and that includes you.
Wow, that is so powerful. That shift. I'm not even going to say anything else. Thank you so much for joining me. Oh my gosh, it has been so, so great to speak with you. And I feel honored to have had you on the podcast. So thank you so much for joining me. My friends in podcast land, take all of this with you and let it percolate through your day and just sit and think about it. And when you think of someone who could use it, send it over to them. Thank you. I will see you next time. Hi, my friend. Thanks so much for listening to this entire podcast. If you found it useful and you're like me and you like helping others, please feel free to share this. Give it a like, give it a comment. If you found something useful in it, there's a chance that someone else will find something useful as well. Also, if you have any questions at all, I can absolutely help, and I would love to help. You can email me at heather@prosperityflowcoaching.com. If you want more of this awesome content, you can follow me on Instagram, Heather Stewart Coaching. You can follow me on Facebook, Prosperity Flow Coaching. And I have a personal request. I want to help as many people as I can with these podcasts. And if you could give me a review, hopefully a good one, if you could share, if you could send this out into the world, I would truly appreciate it. I hope you have an amazing day, and I hope that you find your way to wellness by getting back to me. Take care, my friend.